Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react.
Hey, welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. My name is Sean. Of course, I'm glad you're listening today. Kyle, I don't know about you, but the weather here is beautiful.
It's still a little chilly here, but...
Like, I want to go outside. I don't want to be on the phone with you anymore.
Understood. I'm glad it's because of the weather, though.
Yeah, beautiful weather. Hey, recently, a comedian came to town that I absolutely love. And a few friends and I went and saw him. Do you know Nate Bargatze or Nate Bargatze? I think it's Bargatze.
No.
Bargatze?
Never heard of him.
He's all the rage right now. I think he's got at least 2 Netflix specials, maybe 3. Like, you're living under a rock if you don't know. Anyway.
Well, I mean, I think we've established that in other places before, so...
And I feel like you might recognize him if you saw his picture or a video or something. Anyway, he's hilarious. To give you an idea of maybe how popular he is, he played at the Sacramento Kings Golden One Arena.
Okay.
Like, this man is selling out or close to selling out 17,000-seat arenas.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Wow.
He's on a tour right now. And he's getting ready to film a new special in a couple weeks or soon. So in this particular lineup, he's got, I think, 4 acts that opened for him. And they're all short and sweet, 10 minutes maybe. One of his opening acts is Nick Novicki.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which we interviewed. Cool. Oh my gosh, at least 4, 5? He's back in the beginning. Like, we interviewed him.
Like episode 30 or something.
Yeah, something like that. And I don't have the number, but we can link it in our show notes for easy access. But it was so much fun, and I loved how accessible the arena was.
Mm-hmm.
I have been there once before for a game, but I was before the walker and before the wheelchair, and I don't remember thinking much of it. But this time, went and I used my wheelchair knowing that my friends and I would want to grab dinner, and, I'm just slow with the walker. So I took my chair, and we were on that entry-level floor, great seats, accessible right inside the curtain or the doors. Didn't really have to go too far, not a lot of moving around. Well, once we got settled, I decided, I'm go to the bathroom before the main act comes out. And even the restroom was easy to get in, easy to use. And as I was finished and wanted to wash my hands, I realized, they even have an accessible sink, easy to roll up under, low paper towels. Great. Nice. Except I turned the water on, and there's no soap. There's no soap dispenser.
Okay.
But it was obvious it had been ripped off the wall. Like, I could see where it's supposed to be, but it wasn't there. And, part of me thinks, that sucks, and this place is lame for that. But the other part is like, all right, wear and tear, it's going to happen. But then I started wondering, how long has it been missing? Like, did it just happen the last couple of days and they're waiting for a new one? Or has it been that way for months? And there were, whatever. There's 2 other soap dispensers, 3 sinks down. And, of course, I'm sitting there, my hands are already wet, and I'm in a manual chair. And I'm like, really? Lame. So anyway, I struggled, got it done, and went back to my seat. The other thing that stuck out to me was I decided to go get a drink and some popcorn, so my friend Taylor and I headed that way. Mind you, the show has already started, right? They're on Act 3 of 5. So it's pretty quiet out in that area. So I get in line close to where I see the soda machine, and there's two people in front of me. They're together. And across the way, like 20 feet away, somebody's like, oh, I can help you. Come over here, like around the corner. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm not in a hurry. I'll just wait here. No. There's a whole accessible counter over here. And in my head, I'm like, okay, I get it. You're ready. But man, it would be so much easier for me just to stay where I'm at. I'm not in a hurry. Like, don't make me. But she was insistent. And then another guy was like, no, come over here. And I'm like, whatever. So I decided to move. In my head, I'm like, why in the world do I have to come over there? Anyway, I'm thankful they told me, because they're like, oh, this counter is, you just come right up to the line anytime you're here for any event. So I'm glad I know now that there is a part that's kind of reserved for accessible and employees of the arena. So it does probably move faster. But in the moment, I'm like, no, leave me alone. I just want to stay here. Anyway, the arena is the Golden One Arena in Sacramento. It's downtown. It's really beautiful and super cool. It is a smaller NBA arena, but one of the newer ones that opened 4 or 5 years ago. And at the time, it was the most technologically advanced. I don't know what that means. I don't know what perks they have that others don't. But it's a really nice arena. It's really cool. So, anyway, that was my my outing.
So, everything about the arena was great except for the soap dispenser.
Yeah. And again, it was broken. Like, so not one person's fault.
Right.
I just wonder, how long has it been broken or missing?
Yeah, maybe it was only a couple hours.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe the guy before me ripped it off and took it back to his seat. I don't know.
Newsworthy from Runner's World. Athlete with cerebral palsy finishes the Barcelona Marathon. And Sean, I saw a video of the finish of this marathon for this guy, Alex Roca. I saw it a couple of weeks ago on Instagram randomly, and I was like, oh, cool, another disabled person. Like, he was running, you could tell he had cerebral palsy by the way he moved, right?
Sure.
And he was crossing the finish line. I was like, oh, cool. But then I looked it up later, and I found out that he is the most disabled person to ever finish a marathon. So the article I read said he has a 76% disability. And to tell you the truth, I don't know exactly what that means.
Sure.
But apparently that's the highest number for anyone that has ever completed a marathon. So I just think that he's somebody that is breaking barriers and someone to look up to be like, oh my gosh, maybe I can do it too. So Alex Roca is certainly newsworthy. Our guest today is a former executive at Reata Pharmaceuticals. We crossed paths with Colin Meyer initially in a professional capacity. However, over the last 10 years or so, Colin's become a good friend to both of us and to the FA community. Although we're bummed that he's semi-retired right now, we're thrilled that our friendship continues, and he remains active in the pursuit of additional treatments for FA. In fact, he's riding his bike with us in India in a couple months, and he's been fundraising on behalf of that effort. Colin is a force for good, and we've been looking forward to sharing this conversation with all of you. Please enjoy.
Colin, welcome back to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be back.
Can you remind our listeners how the three of us know each other or how we're connected? We'd love to hear your side of that story.
So the one that I can share publicly that won't get you guys in trouble.
That one works?
So we know each other through the kind of odyssey of getting Skyclarys approved. So I was with Reata for 21 years from basically the beginning. And when we were working with Farah, I met Kyle and Sean, and we got to know each other pretty well as we moved our drug forward and got together kind of on and off the field.
Skyclarys was the first FDA treatment. Right now, the only FDA-approved treatment for Friedreich's ataxia, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But getting back to your time at Reata, one thing that sticks out to me is knowing that Reata was a company for a long time before anything happened in the marketplace. So I'm curious, what is something that kept you motivated and interested in that work that you were doing for 21 years, or in this case, 20 years before the approval?
When we started the company, so Warren Huff, the former CEO and founder, his vision was to put together a company, with a great set of people, and a single set of basically investors to fund many projects, knowing that most would fail. Because in the biotech pharma industry, unfortunately, you can't predict science. Execution is not always great. And in the end, you can still have a successful development program and not get the drug approved. And so we want to have a successful company. We knew that when we were starting, we couldn't really challenge or go up against big pharma. And so we only brought in projects from academia where the biology was really interesting and novel, meaning that we didn't really have a clear understanding, but we thought that there was interesting activity that could be applied to a variety of diseases. And so I think initially it was just us working towards a common goal of having a successful company, getting a drug, hopefully at least one drug to patients in need. And we only focused on severe life-threatening diseases for the most part. And of course, once we identified Friedreich's ataxia as a disease of interest based upon the pharmacology of that class of drugs, we got to know the people involved. And so initially, Farah, the physicians who see the patients, you guys, your friends, others in the community, and it's really motivating to actually know the people who you're trying to help. And as I guess we'll talk about, and there's many ups and downs, and it's hard to do it to ultimately get a drug approved, without support from everyone.
You talk about it being hard, and we interviewed somebody a couple of years back, James McKay, is the CEO of Arstea. He had talked about how he had helped get 6 approvals across the finish line in his years. He has been in that space for a long time, but he talked about 6 approvals and that being a major milestone. And as you said, a lot of smaller companies, biotechs, they might struggle to get one if they're lucky. So can you talk to us about how it felt for you to finally get across that finish line? What was the exciting part of it?
I think the exciting part, and the most exciting part was February 28th last year, Rare Disease Day, when FDA approved Skyclarys, the first and now and still only drug for FA. I think it's for me personally, it was a culmination of 20 years of work, and we had a lot of people help us within the company, outside the company. But there were so many ups and downs in having the company be successful, meaning that we knew the company would be viable. Obviously, we were taken out, which was a very good ending. But after so many struggles from the company perspective, it was great knowing that we accomplished the mission that we set out to. And then from a people perspective, and truthfully, what I think a lot of people don't get in their job or career is actually knowing that they, helped not just someone, but, many thousands of people. And that, there was truthfully a very small team that saw it along the way, while hundreds helped out, just being, one of the core team members who saw it from beginning to end, helping people who have FA. I think it's that was the most important thing for me.
Can you talk about some of the frustrations throughout your 20 years or 21 years with Reata? What kept you up at night?
We could talk for literally a full day about the ups and downs at Reata, and sticking to, I guess, more the development and science perspective. You can't predict science. I mean, you can be fairly well informed, but you just never know, what may or may not happen. We had a safety issue, kill a huge program back in 2012. We had spent over $100 million on a single study, and even more money, on the years of work leading up to it. We went into a very sick population of patients with advanced kidney disease and type 2 diabetes. And we had to stop the study early, unexpectedly, because of a safety signal. And so that was, hugely disappointing to us, patients, the whole community. But you never know until you run the experiment. And so that's just science and drug development.
So when you come up against these things that kind of seemingly derail your progress and set you on a different path, or completely stop for a second your progress, what do you do? Like, how do you handle that for yourself personally and for your team? How do you recover from something like that, where you're hoping that this is going to be the answer, and then all of a sudden it just totally stops progress?
I think it depends upon the situation. For us, having multiple programs, in the early years, we expected things to, die along the way. And so, it was disappointing, but we just moved on. We had other programs. When you get into human clinical trials, it's even more disappointing, because you've already spent, a lot of time and effort, and resources. For us, once again, having multiple projects, it was somewhat of a hedge. For most biotech companies are formed, on the basis of a single lead program. And so the technology comes out of academia. Typically, a company is put together, and then, it's a one-trick pony. And so if the program survives, moves forward, the company survives. If the result is bad in the trial, then the company folds and goes away. And so for us, we had always had multiple programs. The kidney program I mentioned to you was very disappointing, but fortunately we still had a class of drugs. We elucidated what the issue was, and were able to determine that it wasn't relevant to many other types of patients. And that's how we moved past that one. And that class actually is what is part of Skyclarys. And so Skyclarys is in that class, but different drug. So it just depends upon the situation, but that's drug development. It's like oil. You put up a lot of money to drill for oil, and you either find it or you don't.
You talked about having a good result when Reata sold and Biogen purchased, I don't even know the right language, rights, trademark, patent, like what, I don't know what they bought, but obviously Reata comes to an end when Biogen acquired Reata. Can you talk about why, in your opinion, that was a good thing? You labeled that a good thing. Could you help us understand why that is such?
I would say it was good, and I think bittersweet for a lot of people at Reata, because most people really enjoyed working at Reata. We had a great, set of employees who really wanted to make a difference. And so I think, very few people weren't motivated by something like that. And so you expect companies to be acquired, in biotech pharma like us. That's typically what happens. And so I think a lot of us saw what happened this year in 2024, assuming success. And so the only surprise just for some of us was that happened earlier. But as far as why it's good, Biogen's a much larger company than Reata, and so Reata, it was based in the U.S. We had an office in the EU that was small. Biogen's also based in the U.S., but they have around 40 other affiliates or offices in other countries. And they've already been selling drugs globally, including rare drugs for rare diseases and rare neurological diseases. And so oftentimes big companies are excellent at making sure that patients in need get drugs. For us, we would have had to build that infrastructure. We were working towards it. But with the acquisition of Reata, the company, they basically bought us and all the rights and patents. They will be able to accelerate getting the drug to patients globally.
A company like Biogen being all over the place, they can just move at a different rate.
Correct, and they already had people in the countries, offices, relationships, with all the distribution networks, with the regulatory authorities, in those countries, and so they already had boots on the ground in offices. We were having to establish those, and so it's a much more efficient process for them to move forward with the drug.
Can you share a little bit about the Skyclarys Odyssey to approval, and then maybe what it looked like at your level as Biogen came to the table and began the process of acquisition?
And so, as I mentioned earlier, generally with a company like ours, so a biotech company that's developing a drug that gets it approved, very few are able to remain independent for a long time, in part because big pharma is very large. They're more conservative these days, and they watch their budget. They're spending relatively less on research and development, and so the biotech universe is big pharma's R&D engine these days. And so all the big companies are tracking all the companies like us, and when there's one that might be in their space, where they have a presence, they may start paying a lot of attention. And there's a bunch of formal conferences where teams from big companies will meet with teams from small companies, and we attended those meetings all the time. And so for us specifically, we thought that if we could get a drug approved, that was going to be the outcome. And so go back in time to October of 2019, when Reata announced that our MOXIe trial was positive. We were super excited. And based upon the discussions we'd had with FDA, we thought that the data that we generated would be sufficient for an approval. We'd have, a straightforward, exchange with FDA, and it would be a, relatively, easy process. Of course, it's never easy. We knew it would require a lot of work. But what happened 2 months later, we met with FDA in December, and they said, effectively, we agree that the trial is positive, but it's not enough. We need more. And that began, a few-year period of back and forth with the FDA. And they told us, you can either do another study, or you can provide additional data from your completed or ongoing study. And so we had a series of meetings, with them. COVID hit, which made starting a new study, basically impossible. Fortunately, we had this extension that was still ongoing. And so it was a ton of effort from us, from the investigators and the patient community to keep that study going and not lose patients when the patients could not go to the study centers. And so then obviously FARA had their independent effort to petition the FDA. They captured 70,000 signatures. And then towards 2022, the middle, you always expect there to be an advisory committee meeting where there's a public hearing. a bunch of independent experts, primarily academics. Those don't always go well. Even if the data look great, drugs can be shot down because of some real or perceived issue. We received notification that the FDA was not going to hold one. We knew that was very positive. Wall Street didn't necessarily know how to react to it. And then, we're celebrating, but still the mission wasn't done. And as you approach the deadline for approval, you never know what they're going to tell you. And so they could come back with a major issue that they just uncovered. And so leading up to the approval of February 28th of last year, wasn't really until a few weeks before where we were pretty confident the drug was going to be approved. And so once it was approved, it was a huge relief to all of us. And it was for full approval, meaning there's no more clinical studies that we had to do that could result in the drug being pulled off the market. We had to commit to doing some additional work. Obviously, need to get the drug to younger patients, but the primary mission was done, at least in the U.S. From a story perspective, we, as you guys know, but as others may not, we couldn't start shipping drug to patients on that day. We could start taking prescriptions, or the doctors could, but because of all this back and forth with the FDA, we put some of our manufacturing work on hold because it's extremely expensive. And we needed to complete and submit a change of the manufacturing process to the FDA. And so it wasn't until June 28th that we could start shipping drug. And so we announced on June 28th to the world that we could start shipping drug to patients. And within the few weeks before that, we Reata have been having some very secret conversations with some potential companies of interest at these meetings, like I mentioned before. And a few days after we announced that we would start shipping the drug, a couple companies became very seriously interested, to the point where on July 7th, one of them said, we are going to make an offer for you. And then a few days later, Biogen told us that they also wanted to make an offer. And there was a ton of back and forth, almost daily back and forth, through the end of July, where we were getting offers. The board was initially rejecting offers because they were too low. We had already retained Goldman Sachs, one of the largest banks, that's typically on one of the two sides for M&A transactions in the biotech space. And so they'd already done all the work with us to determine what the value should be for us to help facilitate it. And so every few days, we were getting basically a revised offer. The board would have to meet and decide what to do, working with the bankers. And it ultimately led to on July 28th, just a month after we announced that we were shipping the drug, we announced that Biogen was acquiring us. And so that was obviously huge news to the world. We had to control that. You can't leak that your company is about to get acquired because people go to jail for insider trading. And so there's a tremendous amount of effort. It was a shock to most people. So most people in Reata had no clue. Obviously, the patient community didn't know. The physicians didn't know. And there was about a month period where the SEC and the Federal Trade Commission had to review it, and we announced that it closed about a month later. And then there's no more Reata. And so it was a super intense period.
You said something that sticks out to me, that you had to control the information and keep it a secret. And, to some degree, to an outsider, maybe even myself, that doesn't understand the SEC and traded companies, why are you keeping secrets, man? But then you make a good point. When you're publicly traded, you have to. You run the risk of life and jail or freedom, and how that works. So I'm glad that you say that, because I imagine secrecy is really a thing because you're trying to keep people in the dark. But probably
that's when you go to jail.
Yeah. Well, on this side, secrecy, it exists because it has to.
Right, because there's rules that...
Yeah, because obviously if you had knowledge that we were going to be acquired, we were trading at around $100 a share.
Yeah, but it bought more.
You or your family member went and said,
Sure.
I'm going to go, we got $100. Then you sold for $172.50. Yeah. You make $72.50 times the number of shares, and that's not legal. Yeah. It's cheating. It's called insider trading. So there was that whole dynamic too, where we had to be like extremely secretive to our employees, to family members, and during that time.
Oh my gosh. How did you do that? Did you just like lock yourself in your house and not talk to anybody? I'd be bursting.
A lot of it's done virtually. Meetings like with bankers, other company were not done at the Reata headquarters. And it's easy to make excuses about, having to go to another meeting when you're literally just launching your drug. And having to deal with all that and making sure that it goes well and you can get the drug to patients.
So if we shift a little bit to a more personal side of Colin Meyer, I am assuming you are now unemployed.
I'm unemployed, living on a fixed income.
So what are you doing? What's on the docket for you? Maybe either short term or long term. We know you have some children. Like, what's kind of a priority for you?
I think there's a few things, and one of which is just spending more time with the family. And so Reata was extremely intense for the 21 years I was there. Pre-COVID, I traveled all the time. Once COVID hit, we had a super intense set of interactions with regulators that kept me busy. And so I'm now enjoying not having the stress of work, being able to spend time with the family, my wife and 3 girls, 19, 17, and almost 14. So that's been fun. Keep doing that, traveling more, spending time together. And then just getting my life, basically taking back my own life. And so Reata, was my life. And so, getting back in shape, getting, healthy again. It wasn't necessarily unhealthy. It's just, it's hard to find time for yourself when you have an intense, work environment and then your family. More hobbies and spending time we have a place in Mexico, and we're not here in the Dallas area. And so we love it there. And then I've just been back to kind of the number 2 thing, just from a health perspective, planning for a crazy adventure that I was invited on for this summer. I guess last thing, I am staying involved in some things professionally. And so more from an educational perspective, sitting on boards of some schools I went to help effectively provide guidance to schools on how to mentor students and make sure they're prepared as they enter the workforce. And so that's been fun and fulfilling.
You mentioned how intense it was at Reata for 21 years, and you built your life around that. And now you have to totally redefine your life. Kind of, you said, you're reacquainting yourself with all these things. Do you ever feel lost? I don't know. I guess that's something people who are retired feel, or do you struggle? You seem to be finding your way just fine, but is there a process in that, I guess?
I'm very happy. I may work again, probably not a day job. I feel like because work was so intense for 2 decades, like I need time for myself and for my life and family. And so for me, like it's family, it's friends. I wake up later than I used to, an hour later, and I take my youngest to school, which is fun. And then it's going to work out, and I'll do some maybe professional things, and then just have some time to myself. And I need to decompress too. And so I'm trying to keep my schedule fairly open for at least a while.
Before we talk about any crazy adventures I want to go back to your daughters briefly. I can see the 14-year-old loving having you around all the time. But I could also see the 19-year-old saying, Go back to work, Dad. So I'm curious, what's the family's take on your newfound free time, I guess?
I think they're excited. So the 19-year-old, she's at University of Virginia, which is where my wife and I met, actually. And so I graduated from their undergrad, and we actually get to see her more often. We go there to semester, and so she likes to be able to come out there. She has a career interest similar to what I did, and so she's pre-med, wants to go to medical school, and perhaps go into industry. And so she gets it, and she saw how intense my job was. For the middle daughter, she's at basically a boarding school and went to college early. Actually, the school I went to is called Texas Academy of Mathematics and Science. It's at the University of North Texas. So you start college 2 years early. You live in a dorm with a bunch of other kids in the same program. There's a bunch of rules, but she's on more of an art track. But I think she's also happy that I'm able to spend more time with her. And the almost 14-year-old, she's her typical 13, 14-year-old. And so some days she wants to see me, other days she doesn't.
Yeah. Has she talked you into any TikTok videos or not necessarily? Or learning how to dance in the kitchen?
Well, that's what I was practicing just before.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
We interrupted you. Our apologies.
So before we let you go, Colin, you had alluded earlier to a crazy adventure you're going to be a part of coming up. Give us your perspective. What is that adventure, and how in the world did you get roped into it?
So my wife and I were having lunch with Kyle and his parents in Tampa. We were there for the Energy Ball, the big fundraising event for Farah. And Kyle was like, "Hey, I'm planning this trip to India next summer, and I think I'm going to bike the highest road in the world. Do you want to go?" My wife looks at me, she's like, "You have nothing else to do." So I'm like, "I guess I'm going." And so that's where it started for me.
We had that conversation, and I was like, "Yeah, whatever. All right, that's kind of funny, cool that Colin sounded interested." But then you followed up like a week later, and then you like texted me back a week later, and you're like, "So I just bought my tickets to go to India." I'm like, "Oh my." So then, we started working together, and really you've put in a ton of work that I really appreciate on all the planning and stuff. It's really valuable to me to have a partner to figure out all the logistics and everything. And it's been wonderful.
Did you even own a bike before that conversation?
Does my BMX bike count from when I was a child?
Yeah, right.
I have a Peloton.
Okay. I mean, that counts for something.
And I've been training for the past month in my 5th week. And so what we're going to do is we're going to Delhi for a few days, where Kyle and Jen Farmer from FAIR are going to talk to one of the medical institutions there. And we're going to, from there, flying north about an hour and a half it's still in India. If you look on the map, the borders are all dashed because they're disputed. To the east, about 150 miles, there's China, Tibet. Pakistan is to the west, about 100 or so miles. And I think for real reference, it's K2, the second largest mountain in the world, is about 100 miles from our base camp, Leh, which is at 11,000 feet. And so we're going to fly to Leh, hang out there for a few days, get acclimated. We found a tour company that specializes in bicycling trips in the Himalayas. And then once we start riding, we're going to spend 4 days riding up this river valley. And so kind of gently uphill and go from 11,000 to 14,500 feet. We end up in this town called Hanley, where there's a bunch of big telescopes, big observatories for academics have there. The next day, we peak we summit 18,000 feet. And the last day, we summited about 19,300 feet. It's called Umling. It's the highest motorable road in the world. It was just paved for the most part in the past few years. It was just opened up to foreigners a year and a half ago. And just for reference, Everest Base Camp is around 17,500 feet. So we're making the 225-mile trek up to the summit of Umling.
Super cool. And Sean, you're talking like this is the first time you've ever heard this information. You're going with us. So what do you think about this feat and how it fits into the stuff that you have planned for yourself for the next few years, I guess?
I think of this trip like I do most other crazy things in life. Whether it be Race Across America or this one, or maybe even FDA approval, knowing that it's not easy. You set the goal in mind and then you figure it out as you go. So to me, there's a lot of concern, logistically, how do I get a bike there? Can I afford it? How do I get time off work? There's so many things to think about, not even logistically once you're there. What do you eat? Where do you sleep? That's a whole nother beast. But just on the surface, there's a lot of, it's an uphill challenge to, can I get the time off work and so on? But it's like the end result would be climbing the world's highest paved road. Like, who cares what the challenges are? Let's just commit. Because once you're committed, I feel like you figure it out as you go. I imagine it's like having a child or maybe a marriage. That's like, we're in this for the long haul. We're going to figure it out. Of course, I don't have experience in either one of those, Colin. But I imagine it's something like that. It's like there is no backup plan. There's no plan B. There's not an easy way out. So I'm incredibly nervous, anxious. So lots of things I'm worried about. But when you're surrounded with a handful of people that have the same commitment in mind, I go to bed every night knowing we're going to figure it out.
The purpose for what we're doing, obviously, for us, there's an aspect of we want to stand on top of the highest paved road in the world. But there's also the FA community. It's a global community. And it's incredibly exciting to meet other people. I mean, think about just meeting one other person with FA. We have a chance to start to interact with hundreds of new people that are going to be added to the community. And that effort and, the data potentially provided to clinical trials and just the effort, the presence of other people, it's an incredible addition to the FA community. And I think it's something that we're all excited about, kind of making that first handshake to start to understand how we can all work together.
I agree. And it's just, once again, connecting the community globally, providing them with resources, which FAIR has already put together for their constituents in the US and elsewhere about connecting patients, family members to others, giving them the best resources so they can, just live, with FA. And then, from a drug perspective, getting access to the first ever treatment that can hopefully slow progression in them. And so there's that, and there's just the metaphor for we're going to climb the highest peak, and we're going to do what most people think is crazy and impossible. I mean, my friends, they look at me and a lot of them laugh. Like, there's no way, you're joking. You're not doing this. Yes, I am.
Watch me.
I forget who we were talking to, Colin, but Colin and I were on the phone with somebody we know, and we said something like, "Oh, Colin Meyer's going with this," and the guy was like, "Is he going to drive? Hey, what do you mean he's going with you? Like, he's going to meet you at the top?" So you make a good point. Everybody thinks this is crazy.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Developing the first ever treatment for FA after there were around 15 failures. It's just, you got to keep going. And I think it hopefully will be inspiration to everyone. And my goal is to just not die.
There you go. Let's
gives you motivation to jump on the bike and train.
Yep.
Well, you've given us a lot to consider today. Of course, a big reminder for the two of us to train. India's going to be here before we know it. It's not that far away. And of course, I appreciate hearing stories of Reata and the Biogen acquisition, and you personally being able to connect and get on the phone together today. I appreciate who you are as a person, a friend, and of course, somebody that has been a player for the FA community. So thanks for being a part.
Well, thank you guys and Farah and the patient community, for all that you did. Without you, this wouldn't have happened. The clinical network of sites, we leveraged the natural history study, which is conducted by those sites, with all the patients that contributed. If we did not have the natural history study in the clinical network, the drug would not be available to patients. And so I think it shows how great it is when when companies can work together, with the experts, with the patient advocacy groups and with the patient community, in the appropriate way, to make a huge impact, on a disease.
Absolutely. Thanks, Colin. As you can hear, Colin is an amazing guy, and I just love spending time with him.
Yeah. He's hilarious and incredibly smart, which is really kind of bizarre because on one side, if you're just hanging out, getting dinner, he's very much down to earth, just a dad, a dude in his 40s who's living life. But then when you start talking medicine and science, like something switches and he's using words I've never heard, and all of a sudden he's like at a level I'll never be, and it's like, well, how do you do that?
I mean, after the approval of Skyclarys, he was talking about, giving presentations at the FDA and the NIH at like a super, super high level. And like, I never doubted that.
Sure.
But it's interesting to think of him in those two different worlds, right? So,
yeah, that's true. And I will also add, he's surrounded by amazing people too. His wife is pretty cool. His daughters are great. Many of his friends and colleagues, they've all been a lot of fun to be around and meet. So, Colin, thank you for joining us today. With that in mind, Kyle, we wrap up every episode with notes of gratitude. So, who's your thank you note for this episode going out to?
My thank you note is going out to two of my friends, Blake and Dan. And they live in San Luis Obispo. We went to college together, and we've become really good friends. In fact, Blake was on our trip on Race Across America and was an integral part in a lot of the big things that I've done. Dan came with us to ride with us on Ride Ataxia from Portland to Seattle, and he's just been involved. He's been doing videos for us and just all kinds of stuff, and they are organizing a Ride Ataxia hometown.
Nice.
On May 11th in San Luis Obispo. And it's just going to be a really fun day. And I appreciate their continued involvement in my life and in Ride Ataxia, even though we're so geographically separated, they're still there.
Are you going to go to that event?
I will be there.
Nice.
And so anyone who wants to come, visit rideataxia.org/slow, SLO, and you can get all the info.
And if you've never been, slow is hard to beat in terms of beauty and weather. And I put it up there with Santa Barbara and San Diego.
Yeah, and this is going to be a 6-mile ride starting on the beach in Avila Beach.
Kyle, I mentioned in a recent episode that I took a group trip to Vegas, and Taylor was talked about She is a coworker and has become an incredible friend who's mindful of me and my condition and things I might need or things that make life easier, and has been very helpful whenever we go out together or we attend an event together or whatever it may be. So, Taylor, thank you for all the help and your friendship.
And thank you once again to Colin Meyer for joining us and sharing with us his insight today. Check out our show notes for links to the things that we talked about today. Share and subscribe on all your podcast apps. Until next time, keep living with urgency. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This show is possible with your support. Visit twodisableddudes.com to stay connected.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast player.